If you'd like to become a professional podcaster like myself, go to howtopodcastbetterthananyone.teachable.com. Brian Thomas Vargo was a 20-year-old from Houston, Texas. He loved math, but was also a passionate writer. On March 9th, 1976, Brian said he was getting the title to his car in Austin, Texas, then heading back to Colorado, where the vehicle had broken down. He was never seen again. I'm Ed Denzel, and this is Unfound. College. It's supposed to be a fantastic time of 4 years or more of late teens and early 20-somethings learning how to live on their own, taking responsibility for the future through their education, and maybe even meeting that special someone who can be a companion for life. Hey, none of that happened for me, but this is not the time to get into that. Yet, statistics show this is a dangerous time for that same group as well. If a woman is going to be raped, if young people are going to get into drugs, or are going to start showing signs of mental health issues, this is the time. That age range of 18 to 23. And just thinking of Unfound's own disappearances off the top of my head, these are some of the cases that could be seen to be connected to being in a university atmosphere. Susie Lyle, Joshua Guimond, Jennifer Wilkerson, Kristen Modafferi, Mara Murray, Jason Landry. Like I said, that is just a partial list. Well, with the disappearance of Brian Vargo, we run into this phenomenon again. College student goes missing. What exactly happened during his spring break away? And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Linez's website, charleyproject.org. Brian Vargo came from a very good family, with his parents and siblings all being high achievers. Brian was kind of an intellectual himself. He loved math formulas. However, as you will hear, Brian was a passionate writer, and you can see some of his words on Unfound's website. Brian was a hard worker and bought his first new car when he was only 18. He went to college and was on the dean's list. However, there were some issues. Brian ended up wrecking that new car not long after he got it. He spent 30 days in jail in the summer of 1975 due to marijuana possession, and his grades had started to dip at the University of Texas. So, in March 1976, Brian had talked about taking a self-guided trip of Colorado during spring break. Just he himself alone, despite that he now had a car which was not in the greatest shape. Yet, seemingly, that's what Brian did. But on March 9th, 1976, just a couple days into this trip, Brian appeared at his parents' house in Houston. He said his car had broken down in Colorado and he needed the title. Presumably, Brian went to his college apartment to get it. Several days later, someone, allegedly a mechanic, called Brian's father about the car, saying it was still at his shop in Colorado, meaning Brian never made it back there. He was never seen again. Neither was his car. An eventual search of Brian's place did not reveal the car title. However, Brian's wallet was there. His roommates tried to be helpful with Brian's family back then and even now in 2023. But really, they have no answers. Brian's disappearance was off everybody's radar except for his family's due to the missing persons report not being filed until 2021. Yes, really. And not being entered onto NAMUS until February 2023. Please remember that as you try to answer these 3 questions during the interview. Number 1, why didn't Brian just have the car title mailed to Colorado? Number 2, does a letter from a girl reveal where Brian might have been headed instead of Colorado? And number 3, why did it take 45 years for an industrious family member to finally come along to discover Brian was not a college student anymore in March 1976, despite him still being on the University of Texas campus? Brian's family is open to any and all possibilities regarding his disappearance. The guest for this episode is Brian's niece, Amanda Wattkamps. Unfound News. I decided to make the most recent episode of Found available to everyone on YouTube. I go through the disappearance to discovery of the Titanic, which is a timely topic these days. Please, if you like the content, support Unfound at either Patreon or YouTube. Next, June's episode of Unfound Now just came out for Patreon and YouTube supporters. I analyzed the April 20th, 2023 disappearance of Andrew France from Kansas City, Missouri. This episode will be available to everyone sometime in early July. Finally, Isaac Moy has been found guilty of second-degree murder in the disappearance of Unique Harris. The verdict occurred on June 23rd, 2023. Unfortunately, Unique is still missing. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the niece of Brian Vargo, Amanda Wattkamps. Amanda, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you.
Let's start here as we usually do when we have family members on Unfound to do an interview. Exactly, you're the niece. So how exactly is your mother, father, sister, brother of Brian? Maybe we need to go there first.
My father is Brian's older brother. There were 5 kids. Brian is number 4, and my father is number 2.
Okay, so there was a sibling between them.
Yes.
Okay, and how many boys and girls were there?
There were 3 boys, 2 girls. So boy number 1, boy number 2, girl number 1, but that's sibling number 3.
Okay, yes, right.
And then Brian.
Okay.
And then a little sister.
Okay, very good. All right. And just off the top of your head, roughly, what is the age difference between oldest and youngest? Just off the top of your head, the best you can do.
20 years?
Wow, pretty long. Kind of like between me and my sister Diane, it's the same thing, about 20 years. Okay, so I can relate to that. Very good. And how many years difference between your father and Brian?
10?
10 years. All right, so not close.
Right.
Not close. They were not, even though they're sibling, it's still, they weren't separated by like 3 years. So like one is like a junior in high school, one would be in 8th grade. In fact, your father was into his 20s before Brian ever became a teenager, I guess. Something
Yeah.
like that. Okay, very good. All right, so we got 5 siblings, 3 boys, 2 girls. Your father is Brian's older brother. Okay, and one of you, of course, you were not around at that time back in the 1970s. What is your father or anybody else told you kind of the general atmosphere of the Vargo house? What was going on there in the 1970s? How would you describe the family as best as you can tell?
Well, everybody was in different phases of their lives.
Okay.
The Vargo, if you were standing in the Vargo house, there would be probably a lot of comings and goings. Let's see. Brian graduated high school in 74. So while he was, of course, there was a little bit more comings and goings. And then as, you know, each subsequent child got older, they stopped coming around as much.
Yeah.
um, but at the same time, my father was there. My older sister was little. She was the first grandchild. And then my relatives from Cleveland, Ohio would come, and they would stay for months. It was kind of like that.
Okay. And parents married? Brian's parents married let's just say at the time of his disappearance. Were they married?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And what did they do? What businesses, or one stay at a home, or what was the situation?
My grandmother, yes, stayed at home, and my grandfather ran and owned a restaurant called the Black Angus in Houston, Texas.
Ooh, it sounds like a steak restaurant, am I right?
Yes.
Ooh, that sounds delicious. I love steak. I'm a huge steak guy. All right, so the restaurant, of course, that can be a very competitive, very busy, very labor intensive business. Were the children, older children, raised to like follow in their father's footsteps, or to kind of continue the business, or what?
No, I wouldn't say so. My father did end up going into the restaurant business, yes, and
Okay.
actually owns the Black Angus, you know, as the years went on. But no, he was not. None of them were specifically raised to go into the restaurant business. Sure, they may have helped out, and of course, they were offered jobs to work in the restaurant if they wanted and earn money and stuff. But yeah, they weren't specifically like, "Hey, you're gonna take this place over when I'm done."
Okay. That's interesting. I have to ask because my mother's side of the family was in the car business for over 60 years, and it was started by my grandfather and his brothers, and then their children got involved, and then my cousin Ron got involved, and then I was involved for a while, and then I moved to Las Vegas. So I was just wondering if it doesn't sound like it was like that. Okay.
Right.
All right. And so their father's in the restaurant business. You have five kids. Brian, one of the youngest. So, just overall, the Vargo family, kind of would you say, like amongst the kids, the way you understand it, all kind of the same personality, or kind of more diverse? What would you say?
Um, from my understanding, I would say that the even in the 70s, their choices and actions kind of they still hold true to their personalities.
Hmm.
So we'll go with my oldest uncle, which would be child number one. He
Hmm.
was in the seminary at some point, decided that the Catholic organization or whatever it was not hands-on enough to helping and serving people. And he
Wow.
wanted less politics in getting down to the nitty-gritty to help somebody.
Hmm.
So he ended up uh, getting a degree or moving to Holland or somewhere like that in Europe, and then going to India. And then
Wow.
he joined UNICEF. So he continued helping people like that. Um, and then my father joined the military right away when he could and went to Vietnam. He was in the Marines, and
Wow.
his what he always says when he went to the post office as a child, there was, you know, the cardboard cutout of a Marine in the post office, and it was his dream to wear that uniform.
Okay.
My number three, my aunt, she went to college and became a teacher. And then the youngest also went to college and became a teacher and is still a teacher.
Okay. All right. And I one more thing before we get to Brian exclusively. Um, did Brian's parents live long enough for you to know them, or at least did you know your grandparents very well? Or did you get to know them? Of course, some die young. Did you get to know them very well?
So I was still quite young. I guess I was 18
Hmm.
when my grandfather died.
Okay.
But no, I wouldn't say I knew him very well. He was
Okay.
not much of a talker.
Okay.
He was more introverted, which will become a common thread
Hmm.
in the coming story. But
Right.
yes, he was introvert and didn't really talk too much unless you had tried to engage him. And he was um, I guess I would say a personality like an accountant,
Mhm.
very detail and numbers oriented, kept of things. Um,
And what about your grandmother?
and, and my grandmother is the talker. She loves to talk and very social. Um, and
Is she still alive?
yes, she is still alive.
Wow. Okay.
She is over 100. Well, I guess
Wow.
she is 100, but she's in the months past 100.
Okay. All right.
Yes,
Okay. Let's talk about Brian. Of course, you did not know him personally,
I did
but what
not.
have you been told about him? Maybe from your dad, maybe from your grandmother. What have you learned about him? Interests, hobbies, personality, and we'll get into his education in a bit, but just those things, maybe like kind of early teenage type of stuff.
Interests, hobbies, personalities. Or personality. um, he my my grandmother will say he was always doing math in his head, talking about numbers, jotting down like calculations on paper.
What has your dad said about him? You know, his interactions with him. Of course, they're 10 years in difference, but what kind of interaction does your father say? When he thinks about Brian, what does he say?
He was still a little kid to my dad.
Okay.
So the age difference really is apparent.
Okay.
And that they didn't really know each other that well
Okay. That may be
because
understanding, if he went to the military and went to Vietnam, Brian's getting older, he's doing his own thing. Of course, Brian did not go to the military. So yeah, there's going to be a separation there.
Mhm.
And I have to ask, at time of Brian's disappearance, was your father still in the military? Had he gotten out? Do you even know?
uh, I believe at this time he would have gotten out. I believe my father would have gotten out in 70s.
Okay. Okay. All right. So he's likes calculations. Are we then to believe that Brian, kind of a very smart guy, did well in school, thinking about math equations and things like that? So he did well in school?
Mhm. Yes, he did very well in school. Very smart. He made the dean's list his freshman year of college at UT.
Okay. Was he what kind of I don't know if he was into sports, was he into hunting, or anything physical activities that you've ever been told about? Any, kind of trying to get him to know him a little bit better. Maybe he was into cars too.
So, in his box of stuff, which is just an accumulation of the things that were left from his apartment, and then the stuff from, how if your parents would still own the house that you left from,
Yeah,
your stuff, you still have a room, your stuff
yeah,
is still in your room, and it's
yeah.
kind of just sitting there
Yeah, it's
until
frozen in
either.
time. Yes, I know the
Yeah,
feeling.
and
I know
so
that. Yeah.
you kind of box that I was speaking of, there are tons of ribbons from like archery or like going to camp. I think he was a lifeguard. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, things like that.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. What about friends? Outgoing guy, um, kind of laid back. You said that your grandfather was the strong, silent type. Brian like that as well. Is it
So they used to do, boy stuff, uh, digging in a creek and a snake, um, riding bikes, playing basketball, just things like that.
1970 stuff? Just
Yeah,
1970 stuff before video games and Instagram and TikTok and everything else and
that's
selfies.
right.
Okay,
My
very
my grandmother and or I should say my grandparents had a pool table on their in their second story, and the guys used to come and hang out and play pool.
okay. I had a pool table in my house as well, so I know a little bit about that. Okay, you've already mentioned he went University of Texas, correct? University of
Yes.
Texas. How did you decide to go there? We know there are a lot of universities in Texas. Was because he was close? Do you know anything about that? How he chose to go there?
I don't know exactly how or why he chose to go there, but I do know that his close friends were going there as well, and um, I believe a friend's dad actually had talked to him about what he should go in college, and he was very interested in engineering
Okay.
because of the number side.
Right, absolutely. And that's it. That is a good school for engineering, of course. Okay. And I know that he had a job at some point working at a Safeway. You've sent me pictures. I think you even sent me a picture maybe of his name tag or something like that.
Mhm.
How long did he have that job? What do you know about that? Did he just do that during the summer? Or was that all the time? What do you know?
I believe that he did that job all the time, and sometimes he would eh, be there after close because he was a stalker.
Mhm.
Um, and
Stocker, not Stalker. Thank you very much. A
yeah,
stalker. Yes,
that's
please.
that's right.
Please
Um,
continue.
and so he was there after close and would do that. And I do have to also mention it fits in well with the hours that my grandparents generally kept owning a restaurant. You come home late, and then both of them were my grandparents are and were night owls. So
As
it
restaurant people
fit
usually
in
are.
with the whole thing.
Right, right. Okay. And at that time, we'll get up to like the school time, but at the time in 19, around the time of his disappearance, at home, who was actually living at home? We know that he had roommates and everything, but who was actually living in the Vargo house at the time of his disappearance? Of course, the parents, any other children living at home?
Yes, the his little sister
His
was
little
living at
sister.
home. And I would have been uh, Brian's aunt
Hmm.
was staying long term, couple months
Oh, okay.
at the time of his disappearance.
Okay. And just being that you live in Texas, how far was it from where your grandparents were living to the University of Texas, where just in driving time, just roughly hours or
3
minutes or
hours.
how many?
3,
Three,
about
not
3
not
hours.
so not very close then. 3 hours.
Right.
Okay,
I
very good.
suppose that's not very close to some people, but in
Yes.
Texas, that's not that far.
Right. I've driven across Texas a few times, so I know what you're saying. You have to remember Texas has two different time zones.
Mhm.
Okay, moving on to this. This is something we're not going to focus on too much, but we do have to talk about it. He had a run-in with the law. What is your understanding? You've shown me some paperwork. We've talked about it. Of course, the listeners know I talk to guests at least once on the phone, and we have maybe exchanges through email sometimes before we ever do an official interview. You've told me about this situation. What is your understanding of it? Just the generalities of it. What can you say?
I can say that I don't believe that my grandmother knew that he was arrested. at
Mm,
that time.
okay.
And she definitely didn't know what it was for
Okay.
if she had known. And when I had mentioned after I found out about it, she says she had mentioned that somebody may have told her that he had been arrested, but she did, like I said, she doesn't remember anybody saying why.
Okay. All right. And this though wasn't near to his disappearance time. This was like a couple years before.
Well, so it would have been in the summer before he went missing,
Okay.
and he went missing in the springtime.
Right. March of 1976 is when he went missing. So you're thinking middle of 1975. I guess in my world that's not very close, but sure, it's within the year of his disappearance, within a year of nearness to his disappearance. Okay. And what was it was a driving issue, but there were extenuating circumstances that maybe we can talk about. That he was going the wrong way on a road, correct?
Yes. I believe it was a neighborhood road. It may be bigger now than it was then. It's
Hmm.
a pretty affluent neighborhood
Okay.
that he was in. Um,
Okay.
so and when it says they was going down the wrong way, I'm not sure if there was a line down the middle of the road, is what I'm saying,
Okay.
especially back in
I
the
got you.
70s.
I got you. All right. Yeah.
I don't know whether it was more like, well, he was driving on the wrong side of the road and some other, peculiar behaviors. I
Okay.
don't know what those may have been, but
Mhm.
that's what it just says in the on the citation, is driving down the wrong side of the road.
All right. And I guess what we're saying, it's not like he was out on a highway somewhere, going 70 miles an hour the wrong way. Like we know these wrong way crashes are happening all the time, especially here in the Tampa area. And, he's putting other people's lives in danger or something. This was on a residential street, but he ended up getting pulled over. And could there have been alcohol involved, or the way you have read the report? What do you think about that?
So the way that I read the report is a little different than some uh, I guess letters or writings, but I
Okay.
do want to mention that this was 2:30 in the morning,
Okay. Thank you.
that he received these citations and was arrested. So there's a letter. It looks like it was written to somebody. Maybe he never sent it, or maybe it was a scratch copy.
Okay.
Not sure. He mentions that he had been drinking before the arrest, and talks about waking up in the morning
Mhm.
and expecting to be charged with being drunk, but in fact, he wasn't charged with being drunk. He
Okay.
was charged with possession of marijuana, 0 to 2 ounces, and driving on the wrong side of the road.
Okay. All right. And so, um, did he lose his license? Anything like that? I don't know if that would be enough to lose your license, but do you know about that? Any ideas?
I do not have any evidence that uh, he lost his license. No, he did have probation, and I believe he served 30 days in jail from what the paperwork says.
Wow.
I believe somewhere in there it says time served 30 days.
Okay.
I
The
don't know if
way.
those are consecutive days,
Mhm.
and um, I have no evidence of when he would have served those days, but I can say that he would have been able to serve that time
Mhm.
before school resumed the fall semester.
The fall of 1975. That's a very good point. So he didn't miss any school because of this.
Correct.
Okay. But you did say that your grandmother, his mother, who is still alive, uh, was not aware that this happened.
Correct.
Okay. Once again, you've been working on this one. We're going to get into that in a moment. But did you get a feeling like for your father or any of the other siblings or did anybody else know that this has happened? Or is this something that was exposed after he went missing? As best as you can tell here in the 21st century.
I believe that no one else knew at the time. My grandfather may have. I don't have any evidence, and nobody nobody knows. If anybody has found out since his disappearance, it's through asking for paperwork or asking questions
Right.
from
Okay.
police or things like that.
All right. So at the time of his disappearance, your general idea would be that the family did not know about this thing that happened in 1975, in which he spent some time in jail. The general idea is that his family, your family, didn't know.
Right.
Okay. All right. Very good. I'm going to ask you. These are, of course, questions that are on the outline that you have in front of you. I'm just going to go through these questions, and then what I want to talk about, Amanda, is just your involvement, how you got involved in all of this, because you have a ton of information you've sent me. These questions for early 1976. Your understanding, how were things going for him at the University of Texas as far as his grades, getting along with everybody? What have you been able to tell?
Well, his grades from freshman year, as I said, he had made the dean's list.
Okay.
And he actually would have received the letter stating that he made the dean's list after he I got out of jail.
Okay. That's some
So,
interesting timing there, I guess.
right, I actually have the letter, and it is dated August 8th, 1975, and he would have been arrested on, I want to say it's July, the very last day of July.
All right, so we got not too many dean's lists of people going to jail, I'm going to guess, even in the 21st century. So that is interesting. So things were going well for him in jail. Making the dean's list, that's more than I did.
Yeah.
Okay. And what is your understanding, though, about his next semester? I guess his sophomore year, of course, going into that fall semester. Do we know anything about his grades for that time?
Yes, and I will also tell you that I have his report cards.
Hmm. And generally, was he still doing well? Because we're going to get to the spring semester, but the fall semester of 75, just in general, was he doing? Would he still have made the dean's list?
I believe his grades were slipping.
They were.
So they were not A's and B's as they were before, but more like A's, B's, C's, D's.
Okay.
He was, of course, it was going up and down.
Okay. All right. Very good. Where was he living at the time of his disappearance? He was living on campus or near campus for the University of Texas, correct?
Yes, he was living off of campus, but near campus.
Okay. And you don't have to say their names, but was he living with people he just met at school, or were these guys like from high school that he had known for a long time? Do you know?
I do, and I've spoken with both of them. So one of them was a close friend that he had been friends with throughout high school, and I believe he was also a roommate, one of the roommates in the dorm during freshman year.
Wow.
They
Okay.
continued to room sophomore year in this apartment. And then the other guy was also from the same high school. I believe he said that they didn't know each other in high school. They met in college, didn't know each other real well, but they all three seemed to have the same like goal, study habits.
Yeah.
They were all headed in the same direction.
Okay.
And
Very good.
that's why they chose to room together.
Okay. What is, you've spoken to them. What do they remember about back at that time? Of course, before the disappearance. How were the three of them all getting together? How was the college experience going? I have to admit that some of my roommates were not that great in college. But what about how were these three guys getting along from what these two say?
From what they remember, they got along just fine. Um, one of them did say that right around the time of the disappearance, again, this is relative,
Hmm.
in the couple months before he disappeared, that he had gotten angry with Brian because Brian wasn't cleaning up his dishes,
Oh,
which was unusual, and that he took all of Brian's dishes that were sitting next to the sink or whatever and put them on his bed.
oh my. Okay.
And Brian came and apologized to him. But that was pretty much the only tiff that I've really
They've said.
heard
And they were
about. Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And they were there. Okay, moving on. Brian had his own car, bought it himself. Ever have any problems with it? Of course, this car is going to become an important part a little later. But what do you know about this car?
So his first vehicle was a Toyota, and he bought that brand new from the
Wow.
dealership uh, with his money from Safeway.
Okay.
And I have the like title and paperwork, financial paperwork from the dealership about that vehicle. And no, not the first one. And he wrecked it in, I believe, the summer of, that would have been 74. And I don't believe he even had it for a whole year at the time.
Okay.
And he would have totaled it.
Okay. And so,
And he ended up getting money from that vehicle, and in the spring of 75 buying a Mazda RX-2.
okay. All right. So, and he had this car not too long, I guess, before he had it started, had this problem with police driving on the other side of the road. So these are all kind of close to each other.
So he was arrested and cited
Hmm.
for driving on the wrong side of the road in the Mazda RX-2.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. Do we know anything specific about him wrecking this other car? Was it his fault? Did somebody run into him? Was he going too fast? Just in general, what kind of wreck was this? Do you even know?
Uh, I do know there's a diagram on the back of
Okay.
the ticket, of the streets that were that he was driving on.
Hmm.
Uh, I do believe it was his fault.
Okay.
When I've asked my mom, which again, my mom is not the direct relative of
Right.
Brian, but my mom had a lot more interactions with Brian in those later years because my mom was at home
Okay.
with my sister. And so Brian would stop by and just to get out of his parents' house or whatever. But my mom would say that Brian was in a lot of accidents.
Okay. So maybe he wasn't a good driver. Maybe he was going too fast. Maybe he was doing maybe more drinking and driving, or maybe marijuana and driving than we knew. There's a lot of possibilities.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any women in his life that you've been able to tell in early, like a girlfriend? We're going to get to these couple of letters from women, but any actual girlfriend who kind of like another University of Texas student, somebody from his hometown, anything like that?
Nobody that I could uh what's the word I'm looking for, infer.
Okay.
I suppose the talking in letters throughout his life, none of them seem serious enough and or consistent enough for them to be actual girlfriends. Just as we would say now, somebody you were talking to, you were
All
getting
right.
to know, or I guess back
Or
in the
just
old days,
hanging out.
yeah,
Kind of just
maybe they
hanging
would have
out.
called it courting.
Okay. All right. And maybe you should ask you this: when talking to his former roommates, they never mention any women coming over to see Brian. You know, nothing
No,
like that. Okay,
no,
very good.
it was mostly just a group of guys. One of them had a girlfriend, but none of the others had any girlfriends at this time.
Okay, very good. How much interaction, once again, your understanding, you've already stated that maybe Brian was talking a lot more to, I guess, his sister-in-law than he was to you, his brother, who was your father. Um, what kind of interaction, how often, the best you can tell, was he talking to his family? Did he make it back to the Houston area, to their house very often, or the specific neighborhood very often, or was this, he's at Safeway, he's living at this apartment near the University of Texas campus, 3 hours away. What have you been told about this?
So he wasn't working at Safeway that I at UT or around Austin.
Okay.
And as for getting back to Houston, I have tried to find evidence of how often he was going back there. And to be honest, I cannot find evidence that says he went back very often.
Okay.
Um, and the evidence that I have shows that he only went there once since from January 76 to when he went missing,
In March.
and that was in February.
All right. Okay. I should ask you this: going back to his car, getting these charges once again that he had to spend 30 days in jail. Where did that happen? Did that happen near where his parents lived, or did that happen where he was going to school? Near where he was going
I
to
was in
school.
Houston.
It was in Houston. Okay. In general, as best as you can tell, coming up to March of 1976, we don't have a specific date here necessarily for his disappearance. Can you tell anybody worried about Brian at all? We know that his grades maybe dipped. Maybe nobody knew about that, but the way he was acting, the things that he was saying. Anybody from your father, of course, your mother had talked to him. These roommates, was anybody worried about him in March of 1976?
In March of 19, I do not believe that people were worried about him. No. There was mention of him, you know, maybe getting restless at school,
Okay.
maybe getting a little burnt out and wanting to take a break, but that wasn't anything that, especially in the 70s, people were too concerned about.
Okay.
And there his roommates, being able to look back,
Yeah.
will say that there were a few red flags that should have raised some concerns, but nothing to the extent of disappearing or suicide or
Okay.
anything like that.
All right. And we have to remember Brian was 20 years old. No matter what era we're talking about, 20-year-olds can be a little unpredictable. So we
Right.
have to keep that. I mean, this is not a 40-year-old we're talking about. Okay. Let's move to, we're going to talk about spring break of 1976. Then I want to talk about how you got involved in this. And then we'll go to the official story for his disappearance. You've spoken to these roommates. What was their understanding about Brian's plans for spring break of 1976 in March? What have they said? And do they
The
do they even remember?
So if I remember correctly, they both went back to Houston during spring break. Some
Okay.
of the So again, I had said that there was like a group of guy friends. I think that one of them had stayed around and continued to work in Austin, but his apartment wasn't near Brian's.
Okay.
So I've talked to several of the guys in this group of
Great.
friends. Um,
Spectacular. And did Brian ever say, well, because we're going to get to this, I'm going to Colorado. I'm going to Wyoming. I'm going back to Houston. I'm going to California. I'm going to Fort Lauderdale, Daytona Beach for spring break. Do they remember? Of course, it's almost 50 years now, but do they remember if Brian ever said anything specific?
Right. So from my everybody in that group knew that Brian was going to go to Colorado, and
Hmm.
they one expressed it as a self-guided tour of Colorado. I asked if they remember if Brian was going to meet somebody there, if he was going there for a certain reason, was there an event, and everybody just said it was like a self-guided tour. He just wanted to go explore Colorado.
All right, and you're interested. So, what? Just to be clear on this, once again, you've spoken to these people. I have not, but you've spoken to them very recently, though. They didn't say, "I'm going to meet Jane Doe in Colorado. I'm going to Denver. I'm going to Durango, Colorado. I'm going." Nothing like that. It was just a self-guided tour by himself.
According to his friends, it was a
Yeah.
self-guided tour to Colorado. But the story from my grandmother and what my aunt remembers my grandmother saying when
Mhm.
she asked where Brian was that he was going to Colorado to a dude ranch to meet a friend that was working there.
Okay.
But
All
no
right. We're gonna.
specific dude ranch, no specific town, no area has been mentioned.
Okay, and we're going to come back to that. All right, so he did talk about Colorado. This is not something that is like revisionist history or something that has seeped into the story over the years. We have proof that before he went missing, the words Colorado had come out of his mouth.
Um, I wouldn't say that it's proof. I don't have any evidence that he says he went there. I don't have
No, we're
any
just going by what
documents.
these
It's
people
just
have no.
word of mouth.
Yeah, these
Yes.
people have no reason to lie, I guess is what we're saying, and they said Colorado.
Right.
Okay, very good. During the spring break, so is this a situation you're understanding that he just directly left from University of Texas to go to Colorado, or did he have to go to Houston and get some things to go, or what?
No, from my understanding is he directly left from UT, from his
Okay.
apartment.
Okay, very good. We're now going to kind of get away from the disappearance for a second to just talk now about you, Amanda. Now that we've set this all up, everybody can tell she's been talking to a lot of people over the years, working on this, even tracking down the roommates from almost 50 years ago, which I think is really impressive work. Speaking to her grandmother, speaking to her father, her mother about all of this, all these people who had an interaction with Brian back in the 1970s, given that Amanda never knew Brian. How long have you been working on this? When did you get involved in this? When did this become a priority in your life, Amanda?
I would say two is when it became a priority. And I really started going beneath the surface of just asking general questions from my family. So, calling people, calling entities, trying to find evidence of certain things.
Yeah.
That all started in 2021.
Wow. So a couple years ago. So then my understanding then is like, for example, the roommates, you've spoken to those roommates just within the last couple years.
Yes.
Wow, very impressive. And everybody should know we're doing this interview on June 23rd of 2023. This episode will be actually coming out a week from now on June 30th of 2023. All right, so how did you decide to do it? What made 2021 the year? Of course, maybe you've known about Brian's disappearance. You're in the family for several years. Why was it 2021? Why that year? Right in the middle of COVID, I might add. Was that the reason maybe for some free time or something or what?
Yeah, that was actually one of the reasons is that I before COVID, we were avid library users. We would go to the library every single week and come back with a big box of books and then return them the next week. And so there wasn't anywhere to go to
Mm.
do the things that and so sitting at home that was a big reason. There was a lot of computer and screen usage, and
Yeah.
kind of like, well, what can I do with my time on the screen
Mhm.
that would be useful? That, and my grandmother's birthday is in February, and every, after Christmas, uh my focus shifts from Christmas and having to have spent some time with family. It shifts to, okay, the rest of the year, and the rest of the year will bring up my grandmother's birthday and what we're doing for my grandmother's birthday and how old she is.
Yeah.
And and then it's like, oh my gosh, grandma's getting older, and we still don't know what happened to Brian.
Hmm.
And it had also gotten to a point where my grandmother was finally willing to explore his disappearance.
Okay.
In years prior to that, it was just too upsetting to think about. She didn't want to dig into it and find horrible happened to him. She didn't want to know the details, and yeah, that's
Okay.
what it
All
comes
right.
to.
And once again, I understand you have aunts and uncles, and you have cousins. They have children and everything else. Why you? What was it about you that you're working on this, and maybe someone, maybe some other cousins are, and certainly we can give them credit. But I'm talking to you. Why do you think it was you?
Um, why me? I'm not really sure. My father has a research background. He I would find him doing genealogy for the family and stuff like that, and that always interested me. And I was also doing genealogy at this time period, and again, because of COVID.
Yeah.
So, um, it just kind of rolled into it. It was a smooth transition because with genealogy, you're looking up records, you're going to libraries, you're trying to find digital copies of things, you're talking to relatives. So it was a pretty easy transition to do the same in searching
Okay.
for Brian.
Right. I have to ask you this. How old were you when you became aware that there was a missing person in your family? Is this something like your family openly talked about, or was this something you kind of had to find out on your own?
Right. So I don't remember exactly when I would have known about this, but over the years, several times I remember going to my grandparents' house on Christmas Day and looking at their family picture above their uh, cabinet TV and counting the children in the picture and noticing that there was a guy there that I didn't recognize, and hadn't heard his name before. And I knew that sometimes my other uncle, because he lived in various countries, sometimes he was here, sometimes he wasn't, he would show up, things like that. And but I was like, who's that guy?
Mhm.
you know
Mhm.
one, two, three, four, what do you mean? Grandma and grandpa only have four kids, they don't have five. Who's that guy?
Yeah.
And then I would usually get the elbow, the
Yeah.
be quiet. And then it was, we'll talk about this later. And then I would find out later why we didn't want to talk about it. We didn't want to upset my.
Right. Right. Makes a lot of sense. Not unusual. I've covered many disappearances. In fact, a couple this year that are older, like this, going back to the 1970s, where nobody talks about the missing person at all. It's a you're in fact you're not supposed to talk about it. Maybe because it brings people down. Of course, it depends on the circumstances and the person. A lot of things. There's a lot of variables there, but it sometimes I think the general public thinks you have a missing person in family. Well, that's all the people talk about. It's not. It's very much the opposite. It's something that I've had to learn as well. So,
Right.
okay, okay. So you got involved in 2021. You finally said, you know what, I think it's time.
Right.
Okay. And the listeners should know that Amanda sent me a ton of information. I hope to make at least some of it available so people can see, some of the things certainly directly related to getting to know Brian better, some of the things that were going on. At the time, of course, you sent me a lot of pictures of him. I think one of them's like a birthday party, that comes to mind. And so I hope to make that a lot of that available in our discussion group and on our Facebook page or on the website when this episode comes out so people can see it. So you've accumulated a lot of information very quickly, Amanda. So I congratulate you on being very efficient. Really the information you have, you'd think it, you look at it and that looks like somebody who's been working on it for 20 years, whereas you've put this together in a couple years. Very impressive.
Well,
Okay, so
I do have to be honest and let you know that I have not worked on this stuff in quite some time, actually. I
huh.
did most of this work in 2021
Hmm.
because there was time to, and I've hit so many walls
Yeah.
um, of calling places and them something called a retention time. A lot of places have a deadline of we only keep records for this amount of time.
Yep.
So when I hear those words, that somebody's just thrown up a wall and made either there's nowhere to go to get any more information, or this is going to involve going and looking through microfiche or microfilm,
Right.
or this is going to be going to an archival library in the city to look
Right.
for these things.
Right. Or Colorado, dare I say. Maybe.
Right. Or
Right.
and sometimes it's even okay, well, I have to get somebody on the phone and I don't know who and what department they're in to go to this warehouse and look for something, which who's going to do that?
Yeah. Right.
Because they're not related to me. They don't care. They're living their own lives.
They are.
So that's kind of I it's almost like a lot of things have come to a dead end, and I've been waiting and trying to find more evidence or some kind of lead to follow. And the reason that I slowly try to get onto podcasts or put more stuff out there is for more people to be aware of Brian and Brian's case, so that I can get some type of tips or leads to follow.
Okay. Well, let's get into what these tips and the information actually is. And, maybe then people will see why maybe here in 2023 you're running up against, some going down some blind alleys and hitting some roadblocks and all sorts of cliches like that. What is the official story for Brian's disappearance? What is the official story? I'm not saying there may be some reasons, maybe you not totally believe it, but the one that is on the record here in 2023, what is the official story of his disappearance?
I believe the one we'll go with is the one that's on NAMUS.
Okay, please. That's
And
that's a good that's a good point. Yes, please.
uh, I believe it says something along the lines of Brian was a college student at UT who took his car to Colorado,
Okay.
and that he broke down, went back to Houston. His grandmother was the last person, or his mother was the last person to see him, and she took him to a bus station, and that's pretty much the story.
Okay. So the way it reads, once again, we're getting into this, is that we already talked about he's going on this self-guided tour of Colorado. We could visualize the way it says on name is he gets up there, he has this Mazda RX-2, breaks down somewhere. I don't know if those cars were prone to breaking down or not. I have no idea. But somewhere in Colorado, it breaks down. For some reason, he decides he needs the title. So somehow he comes from Colorado back to Texas. So we have to remember Texas and Colorado do not touch each other. So that's going like over Oklahoma. I'm here. I'm a geography professor now. And comes back there to get the
It's going through the panhandle of Oklahoma, which
Oklahoma.
is very small.
It's very, very narrow, but they
But
don't
when you
touch.
get back in the northernmost point
Yeah,
of Texas to across the entire state to go
that's
to
right.
Houston.
Absolutely true. So he comes the whole way back somehow to Houston to get the title. His mother sees him, your grandmother, who is still alive. She sees him. He says he needs to get this title, and she drops him off at a bus station, never to be seen again. All right, so there's no understanding. Did he make it back to Colorado? Did he go to his, and we're going to get to his apartment and all that thing, but that is the official story as it sits here in 2023.
Mhm.
Okay.
And I do want to mention that when I was young and I would ask the question, who is Brian? Where is Brian? And I would always get the story that, well, he went to Colorado. And then my next question is, well, where did he go in Colorado? We don't know. Okay, well, did he come back? Yes, he came back. And then then it was, well, grandma took him to the bus station. Okay, well, so did he go back to Austin? And everybody's like, I don't know.
Okay. All right, that's fine. So it very well may be that he went back to Colorado. Just, I guess that seems like it was his plan. Didn't come back, and that's why this is a disappearance. It very well may be something happened. It very well may be he went to Colorado and decided he was going to change his name. That's for everything. We don't do any theorizing here, but this is the official story. He was in Texas to get this title. The belief is he was going back to Colorado, and then he goes missing. Okay, that is the official story. Now, I have to ask you something. As best as you can tell, how many people who knew Brian well saw him in Texas after his car broke down in Colorado?
I have two.
All right, who?
Well, okay. Let me get down to it. I know that my grandmother and my great aunt saw him.
Okay,
I'm not sure if my aunt, which would have been Brian's little sister, saw him.
okay,
She, she was little. She's not sure if it was this trip or that trip
yeah,
that he came and visited that she saw him.
good point.
And then there may have been an argument that my grandfather and Brian had, but we aren't sure if it was at this trip to Houston or if it was a trip previous.
That's very common, and even for disappearances that are much more recent than this one, people's minds, everything starts to kind of all go together. They remember that something happened, but they can't remember a date, even a week, maybe sometimes not even a month. It depends. This is not unusual, but I guess what we're saying is we're not just taking one person's word for this that he was in Houston around the time of his disappearance. You're saying that your grandmother and your mother saw him.
My grandmother and his aunt.
His aunt. Okay, right. And so that would be his youngest sister, the fifth of five.
Oh, that's my aunt.
Okay, all right, okay. All right, so
So
let's
my
do this
so
again. So his mother saw him, and who else saw him? Maybe we just need to use a first name
her name would be Aunt Margaret.
here. Aunt Margaret. Okay, very good. So we have more than one person. We're not just going by one person's story regarding all of this. All right, moving on. As best as you can tell, we realize these dates, or we're just saying like kind of March of 1976. The work that you've done since 2021, what is the best date that you could ever narrow this down to?
The best date that the Austin cold case department has come down to, I believe,
Okay.
was March 9th,
Okay.
which is because we have newspaper from his apartment in his room that
Yeah.
was dated March 9th. And she dropped him off at the bus station.
Okay, very good. I just have to ask you this, and being that you have all this information, have you ever gone back? Is there a way to go back to 1976 and find out when spring break was for University of Texas? And what and
Yes.
you're shaking your head for all the people who are just listening. She's nodding her head very vigorously. What was do you remember? Can you tell us what was the dates for spring break that year?
I do have somewhere in my paperwork the academic calendar that would tell me exactly when it was. I believe March 9th that year was actually, I can look at the newspaper I have in here. March 9th was Tuesday. So if that was a Tuesday, spring break would have been the next week.
Okay.
And he, from what I understand, left like the weekend right before spring break. So, if you want to be very literal, spring break is considered Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Yes.
So then there's the Sunday before that, then the Saturday, and then the
Yeah.
Friday. So he would have left maybe on the Friday before that.
Okay.
But
All right, and we're going to get to, if that's it's seeming a little weird to people, we're going to get why that might seem that it is weird, but we're going to get to that in a moment. All right, so I guess what we're saying is the dates kind of line up. If it's March 9th, that kind of goes along. It's not like spring break was like March 25th, or he went missing on March 25th, and spring break was on March 9th or something. They're really, really close.
right. And the reason that I even questioned why would I suppose I'm the one who figured out that it was spring break within my family because in going through all of this, you're going, okay, well, why suddenly would he just go, hey, I want to go to Colorado in the middle of school? Why would he all of a sudden do that? And
Mhm.
then you go, okay, well, what holidays were around there? And in Texas, spring break is in March.
Mhm.
So then I found out when spring break was exactly. And then I ended up being able to speak to his roommates, and his roommates then confirmed that it was spring break. And that was the reason that he was leaving, was to go for spring break to Colorado.
All right, very good. That's really, see, this is how you do it, people. Listen to Amanda for all you people who, whether it's a disappearance in your family or not, this is how you do that kind of work. Nicely done. Okay, very good. Let's move on to this now. So, just a question. So, as best as we can tell, then, we really don't know, if we're to believe this story, how Brian got from Colorado back to Texas. I guess there's only a couple ways. I guess bus, flew, hitchhike. We don't know.
I would say flying was not in the cards.
All right.
um, I w- I would say it was either bus or hitchhiking.
Okay. And either way, that's going to take some time. There's going to be a lot of stops. You might be able to drive it yourself back then. I don't know how many hours, but all you have to do is stop to get gas, go to the bathroom, and you can make it back. But a bus has to go here, it has to go there, it stops there, it's only going 50 miles an hour or whatever. It's going to take a lot longer. Hitchhiking as well. All right.
Right.
Moving on, as best as you can tell, reminding everyone that Amanda was not around back then, but the best you can tell, when did somebody realize something wasn't right? If we're going to accept that it's March 9th, 1976, as best as you can tell, when did his mother, your father, or the roommates or somebody else, when did somebody realize, you know what, Brian's not around?
Okay, so this was also part of the digging and the research to match.
Yeah.
I'm trying to match up dates and things
Yeah,
like
great.
that. And then
Fantastic.
talking to his roommates, it came down to his roommates that were the ones to say, hey, we haven't seen Brian in a while. And the reason that it came up is spring break ended. Spring break is a week long,
Yeah.
and school resumes after spring break ends. Well,
Right.
I would assume that it kind of went like, if you think about it functionally as a 20-year-old person, you're thinking, okay, well, we haven't heard from Brian in a while, during spring break. We're going back to school. It's Monday. Monday goes by, he's not there, but you're going to class. your other roommate's going to class and you're living your life and you're thinking, okay, well, maybe again, there's no cell phones. You're thinking, well, maybe he's been here and we just missed him, or maybe he's going to his classes.
Right.
So Monday night comes by and maybe somebody's going to work, maybe somebody else is not, but they're thinking, oh, we haven't seen Brian today. And then the next day happens, and it happens the same way. I don't really know exactly what day they would have realized they had not seen Brian, but they say it wasn't too long after spring break ended that they were like, hey, have you seen Brian? And that's when everybody goes, no, I haven't seen or heard from Brian. And so they picked up the phone and they called my grandparents.
All right, so they did the absolute right thing. And I guess maybe one of the other things that might have tipped them off, if they're living with him and just missing him, no dishes or anything like it's been stated earlier, him not taking care of his dishes or whatever. Maybe that could have been an issue again. All right, so they're just not seeing him around. Nothing looks like it's being moved when they're gone. No kind of
Right.
feeling that somebody, there's like a pillow on the couch that's been moved or anything like that. Okay.
They did mention that they had opened up the door to his room and looked around in it to see if anything looked like it was moved, or you know just basically what was the condition of his room.
Right.
And they didn't notice anything that was different or off other than it was messy.
Right. Okay. And on top of everything else, they don't see his car out in the parking lot or something like that. Don't see his car, which is also another sign that he's not around. Okay, so they're very helpful. I think the roommates did the best they could under the circumstances. Of course, remembering this is 1976, there's no cell phones, there's no social media, there's no internet, there's nothing.
And
How
they're
would you say
20-year-old guys, by the way.
right? And how would you say that your grandmother, grandfather reacted to this? The roommates call, and what goes on at that point?
To be honest, I really don't know what went on.
Mhm.
I don't know if it was, all right, let's immediately call the police. I'm not really sure. And my grandmother, again, she's 100 years old
Right,
now, doesn't
right.
really remember exactly what happened at that point.
Okay.
Uh, I do know that she said that she called the police, and since I remember having the courage to ask her uh, if she had made a missing persons report, she says yes.
Mhm. And we're gonna get to that a little down the road. All right. So she said that when that happened, she knows her son's not back from spring break. She thought he was going back to Colorado to get his car or do something with the title with his car. But seemingly, then she must have been thinking, well, I guess he never made it back to Colorado or something.
I would assume it was either he never made it back to Colorado, or he's still exploring, because there's a letter out there in somebody's stuff. Either it's at my grandmother's now in her papers, or
Okay.
it may still be in one of my aunt's um you know piles or boxes or whatever.
Mhm.
But there's a letter somewhere that we know about, that he had sent my grandparents, telling my grandparents that he wanted to go and find himself. My sister and I refer to this as the "go find myself" letter.
Okay. All right. Okay. Great.
So when they said we haven't seen Brian, the roommate said, Brian hadn't been back from spring break. I believe my grandparents' first reaction may have been, okay, well, maybe he's still out there trying to find himself. I'm not sure if they weren't worried about him returning to school, or if they were like, well, why didn't he tell us? I have no idea.
Okay, very good. What is you said your mother had some sort of interaction more than your father did. Does she remember that time? Have you spoken to her? Recognize she is not actually a blood relative of Brian, but she was around, like you said, maybe you had seen him in the previous months. Does she remember anything about this time, after Brian went missing, those, like that end of March? of 76.
Right. So my mom doesn't remember a lot from that time. They were having their own issues with their restaurant. My parents owned a restaurant as well, and it was the 70s in Houston, and there was some gas crisis and
Right.
and on and on with that.
Right.
So my parents, of course, were busy themselves, and they had a child, and I believe my mom may have been pregnant with my other with no, she had two children at this point.
Okay.
But the one who does remember a lot is my sister. And I had asked her this actually a couple of days ago to refresh my memory
Mm-hmm.
on her recollections. And what she remembers is that it was Easter around that time, and she remembers that Brian was not at Easter.
Yeah.
She remembers that she had her first communion, I think, which is a Catholic
Catholic
celebration.
thing. Yeah, I was raised Catholic. I know all about it. Yeah.
And I
Yes.
believe that she remembers that he wasn't there, and that it was kind of unusual for them not to hear from him. But that was really
Okay. So I guess what we're saying here is everybody have their own lives to live. It was not your mother's or your father's, to be keeping in on Brian. He's not their child. He's 20 years old. You know, they want to be helpful, but it's not their job to be watching over him. In fact, at 20 years old, it's nobody's job to be looking over him, right?
right.
Okay. Now, eventually, though, people did go to the apartment, and what was found there? Who went there? What was found?
Well, let me backtrack a little bit on that, because it must have been before that my grandparents had hired a private detective or a
Oh,
private investigator.
okay.
And let me also preface this that this is a college town at this point. Austin is, and there are a lot of apartments that when you rent them for a semester. So at this point, it's March of the spring semester, and the spring semester will end on June, which again, I have the exact dates looked up, but so it would have ended in June. So they would have vacated the apartment in June. So at some point between March and June, a private investigator had come to Austin and spoken with one of the roommates, but for some reason didn't speak to the other one.
Hmm. Okay. All right. And you find that unusual? Was the other roommate just not around or what?
Yeah, I mean, I find that unusual. I can't imagine somebody's looking for, if somebody's paying me to look for a kid, a 20-year-old, anybody,
Mhm.
you speak
Yeah.
to everyone. You don't speak to just one person that they lived with.
Well, we'll just have to. I don't know what the roommate that didn't get spoken to, was he not there?
I mean, he could have been in
Is he
class.
otherwise taken up by something else? I guess we just don't know.
Yeah, like I
Okay.
said, he could have been in class all day.
Mhm.
Maybe he was at work, but the private investigator only spoke to one roommate.
Okay. Really, the way my opinion of private investigators, that doesn't surprise me at all, even in 2023. But that's my life. I wouldn't expect a lot of other people to look at it that way, but that's been my experience. But so, did the private investigator, did somebody in the family go over there and get Brian's stuff? What was there? What wasn't there? For example, did it look like he had gone back to his apartment when he came back from Colorado?
So when everybody left for the summer, and meaning they also took all of their stuff, my aunt remembers my grandparents, so my aunt and Brian's parents, calling, saying, hey, can you go and get Brian's stuff from the apartment? My aunt remembers there not being anything else in the apartment, which would mean that everybody else had moved out.
Okay. Makes sense.
And I asked, like, how did you get the key? How did you get inside? She can't remember those details.
Not surprising.
But they went in his room, and she said it was messy. It's a college boys apartment, kind of what you would expect. As for what they found all of his clothes, his bed.
Most importantly, did they actually find his wallet? Did they find anything like a wallet that would be something that he would normally carry with him, even, of course, for a guy in 2023? What was a wallet that Brian could have been carrying found there?
Yes, there was a wallet, and I believe even a set of keys, which I believe were actually from his old car. Nobody has told me that. I'm putting that together because in this box of stuff there's a key there, and in inspection of this key it says Toyota on it, which was his previous vehicle.
Right. Okay. But this wallet, do you think, I mean, guys, I don't, but some guys have different wallets. Is this the wallet that you think Brian was using at the time? Was his ID in it? Was his driver's license in it? I know there's a variety of things that were in it that you sent to me, and I don't think we need to get into that. All I think we need to establish is this the wallet that Brian was using in March of 1976?
We do not know if it was the wallet that Brian was using in 1976, but there were things in it, and I believe there was an ID in it. But also, that wallet and that ID are not around anymore.
Do you think that's just through the sands of time, or did they get turned over to the police, or what? Any ideas?
Yeah, no idea. It could be that they just got shuffled in other things, or maybe they were given to my grandfather and my grandfather put them somewhere safe, and then somebody, after my grandfather died, they cleaning out stuff, and they were like, wallet, what do we need this old wallet for? Not putting it together that it may have been Brian's or things like that.
All right. So most importantly, remember the story is that Brian came back to Texas to get the car for his Mazda.
Car title.
Car title for his Mazda. Was the title for that Mazda ever found?
Don't know that either.
Okay.
My grandmother doesn't know if he found it. She just remembers him rummaging around.
Okay, so we don't know if, of course, if the title is missing, it would go into the idea that yes, he did make it back, and that he did take it with him. On the other hand, if the title was there, then we have to start thinking, well, maybe something else went on here. But the title's not, we don't know what happened to the title for that car.
No.
Okay. Now, there were some bus tickets that you sent me pictures of, but were there any bus tickets between Texas and Colorado?
No.
Okay. But there was a bus ticket, but it was from something else.
Yes, there were bus tickets from from Austin to Houston, Houston to Austin. And that would have been the last weekend in January, first weekend in February, before his disappearance.
Do you think there's any reason he was using a bus to get between these two locations, given that he had a car?
This car was a piece of garbage.
All right, okay. So he got a new car and wrecked that one, and so he ended to get another one. He got a POS.
Yes. So
Okay.
from his writings, in 1975 in an English class, I suppose that they had to write a journal back and forth with the professor. And in his journal, he talks about this car and he says it's a 1970, I believe it's 72 or 73 RX2. He bought it used, of course. And he mentions that he has to push, like jump start it, and that he can't turn on the headlights and the radio at the same time.
All right. All right. So he's just so he wouldn't drive it between. I'm just thinking out loud. He wouldn't drive it between Austin and Houston, but he will drive it to Colorado.
Right. I don't know if he had fixed it, like had been working on it and trying to fix it through these, months between there. But yes, accurate.
All right. So now we come to this. When did everybody find out that actually Brian wasn't in school anymore and that he had dropped out? When was that exposed?
That was exposed in 2021.
So all these years, people thought he was still enrolled at the University of Texas. All these years for his disappearance, but it took you to come along to figure out that he wasn't.
Yes.
How did you do that?
I called the University of Texas
All
and
right.
I
Sometimes
started
it's just as
asking
easy as
questions.
that.
Well, I can't say it was easy.
Mhm.
I will say that some people do have a little empathy for you, or even a lot of curiosity
Right.
when you call them and say, "Hey, so I have a weird question," and they're going, how weird is this question? But when I say that I have an uncle that's been missing since 1976, and then I proceed to ask my questions, they're like, yeah, that's a weird question. I've never been asked that before. So they're usually then a little bit more curious to find out the answer for themselves
Yeah.
while still abiding by the FERPA laws.
Right. All right. So you found that out, and actually, he dropped out right before spring break.
Yes, that date of March 9th that the newspaper left in his apartment or in his room in his apartment is the same day that they have down for his last day of class attendance.
Is it your impression that his roommates did not know that he had dropped out of school?
Correct. It is my impression that they did not know. In fact,
Okay.
I asked them, did not
Okay.
know.
All right. And who was paying for his school? Was he paying for his own college or were his parents paying?
My grandfather was paying, yes.
All right. And so
And
he
he was
dropped out.
also
Please.
paying for his apartment.
All right. So Brian's getting his education paid for. A lot of kids do. I have to admit, that's how mine got paid by somebody else. And then Brian just goes up and quits, even though somebody else was paying for it.
Right.
Okay.
This also leads me to a couple of other thoughts that I'd just like to mention. In trying to figure out all these small little pieces and details, um, my thought was, okay, you're trying to figure out, did Brian disappear on purpose? Did he have intent?
We're not gonna theorize. I just want to
Oh,
we don't want to get a theorize. We're just stating he quit school, took to find out the 2021. He wasn't paying for it though. Somebody else was. So it wasn't like he told his father who was paying for it, you know what? I'm dropping out of school.
exactly. Because we
Okay.
can't talk to my grandfather and ask those questions, that you kind of have to follow as me doing some research, you have to follow somewhat of a theory to make it make sense. Okay, well, if this then that, or if this then that. And the question was, did my grandfather continue to pay for school, or did my grandfather continue to pay for his room in the apartment? And the answer has to be yes, he continued to pay, because I also went and asked the roommates, did y'all have to find another roommate? Why was his stuff allowed to stay there? And did y'all struggle because y'all couldn't have somebody come and vacate the room and and move in his place. And yes, the answer was my grandfather continued to pay, expecting Brian to come back.
What we're also saying is that wasn't a spring break for Brian. That was break forever, Brian. Right? Right? It wasn't a spring break because he wasn't going back to school. It was, I'm leaving school.
Well, it was, as far as we thought, it was, he was just taking a break from school. And the reason we thought that was, for one, the letter that said that he wanted to take a break from school and go find himself, but also in the papers from the apartment my aunt found, there's an application to withdraw from school. And it says that he plans to come back and attend summer school, which would have started in June.
Okay. All right. So he dropped out, but it took until 2021 to figure this all out. Okay. So before he went missing, he was technically not a student at the University of Texas anymore. Okay.
That's cool.
Moving on. We're just going to take all these letters kind of in a group. There's a lot of letters that Brian, he did a lot of writing, and I want to concentrate on 3 of them in particular. Because maybe these are things that are just for school. Maybe there's something real. What did the father, we're not sure if these are real or just school assignments. In general, what did the father letter say? We don't have to read it word for word, but just kind of a general tone of it. It had to do with communication.
Right. I would say that it involves, like, you don't understand me. You don't understand me, and I can't talk to you, and you don't know how to communicate with me.
Right. And everybody should know we will I will post this letter so everybody can see on Unfound's website, theunfoundpodcast.com, so they can read it for themselves. But it was just communication. There's like a Bible verse and he references God, I think, in it and some other things. But to be clear, though, we're not sure if this was some sort of school assignment or that it was something that he sent actually to his father. It could have just been something he was assigned to do. Do we know either way?
That particular letter, I believe he actually sent, and I believe that there was an envelope with that particular letter.
Okay. All right. So might see this as something being real, having an issue with his father. Does not mention his mother at all.
I don't remember that.
I don't think it does. Okay. Moving on. So we have something that was in Brian's mind in like the year before he went missing, not being able to communicate with his father. It seems like it's something that was real. Now, the next one, though, it talks about him killing 2 people. Is this, once again, is this something that the work that you've been doing, something that is real? Or is this just an assignment? Or was he like working on, he was going to write a novel? How do you look at that letter? And once again, this will be one that we'll be able to post so everybody can see it for themselves.
In that letter, I believe he was writing to a specific girl that he may have been talking to.
And he was telling that he actually killed 2 people.
So for quite some time, until I was able to speak with somebody about this this event, it was always a huge question mark, and I had gone and searched through newspaper archives in Houston looking for the killing of 2 people, or 2 people found dead and around this date. And I couldn't find anything, but I ended up talking to one of a friend that Brian grew up with, but also went to UT, and he ran into, and I can't remember, they were at a party or something, and this friend remembered, when I spoke to him, that Brian told him he was at a, quote, I'm quoting the guy, not this guy quoting Brian. The guy told me that Brian said that he was at a discotheque in Houston, and he was going to the bathroom, and two guys walked up behind him and grabbed him or attacked him, and Brian fought back. And from this letter and the friend's recollection of the story, I put together that this is the same night that he was arrested for driving on the wrong side of the road, because he also goes on to say that he woke up in jail, expecting to have gotten a drunk in public or driving while intoxicated.
All right. So once again, he wrote to a girl saying that he killed two guys. Do we believe that? Or is that just a story?
Do we believe that he killed two guys? No.
Okay. Moving on to the Kim letter. This is important because she lived in Wyoming. Once again, what is the tone of this letter?
Oh, wait a second. Wait a second. You added something. We don't know that it's Wyoming.
We don't know. All right, go ahead.
Oh,
Please.
we just know that it is a place called Cheyenne.
Okay.
And
what is the tone of this letter?
The tone of this letter is that he's inferring. It sounds like he may want to go and visit this girl in Cheyenne. But she writes back and tells him, "You're a great friend. I, went on a couple of dates with other guys too. I really enjoy your friendship, but I'm dating this guy," and she mentions the guy's name. And she goes on to talk about what else she's doing at that time, which seemed to be summer. She mentions another female's name. So her name, the friend or sister or however this person is related, her name is Karen. And she talks about doing what you would call two-a-days for cheerleading.
Yes.
And she says, "Don't come and visit me in Cheyenne. I have a boyfriend named Bill Samuels, and he wouldn't be happy with me talking to other guys."
Have you ever been able to track this woman down as a woman, a girl, of course, girl then, you may be 18 or something, woman now, hopefully she's still alive. Do you have any idea who she is?
I do not have any idea who she is. I have gone through, well, first step was, okay, how many places are called a county named Cheyenne, a town named Cheyenne, a region named Cheyenne? If there was even like a tribe or tribal land area. Cheyenne, but we do know that she was going to high school. So I went through all of these yearbooks, and any town, county, whatever named Cheyenne for someone named Bill Samuels. I'm sorry?
Yeah, very common name. Unfortunately, both very common names.
Bill, Billy, Will, William. And I found one. And I ended up contacting her, but was unable to get through to her. My sister was, so I would call, my sister would call kind of thing, because we have different schedules. So my sister ended up calling and speaking with her, and this woman had no idea who Brian was, didn't know the Bill Samuels.
All right, so we don't know who she is, but it's important because Wyoming, I mean, Colorado, if you're driving from Texas to Wyoming, Colorado is on the way. So there's an idea maybe, was he going to see her even though she didn't want him to because she had another guy in her life? This is why we brought up this letter. This is not the only letter that he got from a woman, but this is important because if we're to believe it's Cheyenne, Wyoming, maybe there's something there, but we still don't know in 2023 who she is. Maybe this podcast will get out to the right person and she'll say, I'm who that is. That's why we do this. All right.
Right. I also want to mention that there are very few places named Cheyenne.
That is true.
So
That's true too. All right. That's a very good point. Right. Let's move on to this. Of course, we can't forget this car. Not only is Brian missing, but we still have this car. And so, some questions. Do we have any location, if we're to believe the story that he did go to Colorado? I'm not saying people shouldn't, but do we have the location of where the car was in Colorado?
we do not.
Okay. Did a car mechanic in Colorado ever, to your knowledge, ever call, leave a message for the roommates, reach any of the roommates, reach your grandparents, as far as to get paid for the work that was allegedly being done on the car in Colorado?
Yes. So it's alleged that that Brian left the car at a gas station that also had a mechanic that worked obviously on vehicles, and that's what you have to also infer there is that why would he want the title for a car?
You don't know.
Right, we don't know, but if you're thinking about why would somebody want a title, it would be to sell the car.
Sure.
And so if he's wanting to sell the car, it would also, reason that he wants to sell the car because it needs too much work and he would rather just sell it and have the
Yep.
money
Absolutely.
than pay for the work to be done. So he leaves the car with the mechanic, and we don't know at what point this mechanic called, but somehow this mechanic ended up getting a hold of my grandfather.
Huh.
And
Okay.
again, I don't know how he got my grandparents' phone number. I don't know if he called the operator. I don't know if this is where I'll be. No idea. He calls my grandfather though and says, "Hey, your son hasn't come back here. I don't have, or I need to get rid of this car,
Okay.
and it's been broken into.
Right.
I need the title." So
All right. So I guess what we're saying is there is proof that Brian drove to Colorado and his car broke down, being that somebody called. Once again, if we really, really want to get suspicious, was this really a mechanic at all? But anyway, if we're to believe this, somebody somehow did reach Brian's father and was asking about the car. Hey, I got this car here. What do you want me to do with it? Something like that.
right.
All right. So the Colorado story, although maybe some people are going to believe maybe it was total crap, we have this guy calling, maybe it's not. Okay. Was the car really ever located, though?
To my knowledge, nobody knows where. I would have had to imagine that my grandfather would have had to send this temporary title somewhere. He would have had to have the
Yeah,
address.
I agree.
But my grandfather's dead and I have no proof or address to say where in Colorado this was.
I guess what also sticks out to me is that, Brian's missing. His car's, of course, missing. And then a mechanic out of nowhere calls and says, you know what, I have Brian's car. That there would have been more of a concern about that. That maybe Brian's father would have said, don't you move a muscle. I'm going up there to get my son's car because he's missing. That didn't happen.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. All right. And Brian never specifically said where he was in Colorado. And I guess neither the mechanic did. Wasn't Denver, wasn't Durango, wasn't Silverton. I'm only saying those names because I've been to those places in Colorado. Nothing like that.
I don't know.
All right. In Greeley, Colorado, I was there twice for a murder trial. All right. So no places mentioned, just some guy calling out of the blue. Has anybody over the years from Colorado ever come forward to say that I know Brian, I like a Colorado friend, like from Texas or going to the University of Texas, anything like that?
No.
None. She's shaking her head no. Okay. Let's move on to this. Brian's journal. He kept a journal. Did Brian
Uh,
keep a journal?
he kept a journal with I suppose with his professor for his English professor.
Okay. Have you gotten to take, of course, we've already talked about some of his writings, but overall, have you gotten to take a look at the whole body of work of Brian, the Brian writing did? For example, let's just go like 1975 into 76. Have you gotten a chance to take a look at the whole body of it? And we're not going to get into any specific, private information, but you've gotten to look at it.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Anything in there about going to Colorado?
In 75, he mentions wanting to travel. He
Okay.
mentions wanting to buy parts so that he can put a surfboard on top of his car.
Neat. Okay. Of
I
course, you
think
can't do any surfing in Colorado, so maybe that opens up different possibilities there. But okay.
that's right.
All right.
You
Okay.
you can do some surfing in Houston, or well, not Houston specifically, but on the coast of
On the coast.
Texas.
Sure.
But I have to say they're not great waves.
No, they're not. I live on the Gulf too, I know. Unless there's a hurricane coming. Okay,
Right.
so some talk about traveling. Any talk in any of those writings about suicide?
No.
Any self-harm or being depressed? Anything like that?
I would say yeah, there was some depressive symptoms.
Okay.
Maybe like existential questions. Who am I? What
Meaning
am
of
I
life,
here
but why am
for?
I here now?
Right. And at the same time, I don't think those are unusual questions for a 20-year-old
Nope.
to ask.
I agree.
Um,
I totally agree with you. That wouldn't be unusual in 2023 or back in 1923. So yeah.
right. But there are some questions about wanting to improve himself and quit smoking pot and quit smoking
Mhm.
cigarettes and
Okay.
things like that.
Okay. Any talk about him running away and starting a new life or wishing to live in Hawaii or anything like that?
No.
Did Brian, in any of his writings or anything you've seen, of course, you have a large body of pictures and letters and everything else. Did Brian ever prove Brian ever went by another name other than Brian Vargo?
No.
None. Always Brian Vargo. Okay. Now we've talked about these roommates quite a bit. Once again, I think this is excellent work on your part. Please go ahead. You have
I
your
do
finger up.
want to mention that I have thought and wondered if that ID in the wallet that was found may
Hmm.
have, and I've wondered if, because I don't know if you know anything about fake IDs, don't know that much about them, but sometimes they can have your picture with other people's name.
Sure.
Uh, I'm thinking of a particular movie, but maybe they had there if what if there was a different name on there and it had his picture and now he goes by that name? That's always made me
Okay.
wonder.
All right, but still, that's theory, conjecture. But anything that he actually wrote down, he never signed anything John Doe or Larry
No,
Smith or anything like that. Okay.
no.
Let's move on to this. Roommates, you've spoken to them, talked about Brian being around two kind of shady guys that he had brought over to their place. Why don't you talk? When did this happen, and what was the thinking on it?
Um, these two shady guys. So when I was asking the roommates about if Brian's behavior had changed or uh if anything weird ever happened uh coming up to the months prior to his
Yeah,
disappearance,
it's very important.
uh, these two guys that came over and stayed in the apartment,
Hmm.
I asked how long? Do you remember when it was? Was it a few days, or was it, months before his disappearance? Or can you even remember if it was cold outside or hot
Yeah.
outside?
Yeah.
I'm just trying
Good
to
question.
jog their memory.
Yeah.
And what I got was it was at least in 1976. So it was
Wow.
after the holiday break.
Okay. Very close to his disappearance within a couple months. Okay.
Right. And they were just two guys that one of the roommates just remembers being kind of, he just got a weird vibe from them. He didn't really, I'm trying to think of how to phrase.
Let me put it this way. They didn't seem like college types. They didn't seem
Right.
like two other fellow students from the University of Texas.
Right.
Okay.
And the fact that they were also staying there for a night or two or whatever also leads one to believe that they must not been from the area.
Okay. Did the roommates describe these two guys? Maybe anything? White guys, black guys, Hispanic guys, Asian guys, tall, short, look like football players, look like track runners, anything like that.
No, they did not.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. All right.
just shady characters or seedy characters, something like that.
Okay. Anybody that in this coming out that your mother, your father, could these have been friends from Houston, from Brian's hometown? Of course, these at least one of these guys actually was Brian's friend from high school as well. But anybody in the Houston area, maybe coworkers who worked at Safeway with him or what? Any ideas?
No, both of these guys that he was living with, and the guys that he, like, the group of friends
Yeah.
that hung around, they were all from the same high school, not necessarily knowing each other in high school, but they, still went to the same high school, so they would have known other people themselves. And this is a public school, so they would have been kids in that area. They didn't know these guys.
Very good. Okay. And the roommates, the way this is the only time, this one time, the way the roommates are, and I realize this is almost 50 years ago, they just remember this one specific time these guys came over.
Yes.
And they can't remember Brian ever saying their names are John Smith and Larry Brown. They don't remember names, anything.
No, basically,
Okay.
when you ask specific questions like that, it's,
Just can't
this is
remember.
over. Yeah, this is like over 45 years ago. I
Right. All right. And once again, I'm 52 years old. I was alive in 1976, and I kind of remember 1976, but I'd only been 6 years old and things. But, maybe, I have to think about like things in the 1980s when I was in my teens. You get friends of friends, you get introduced to them. Maybe you remember what they look like, but can't remember their
right,
names or anything. But okay, very good. All right. So we got these two guys, not sure what to make of that. Might be something. All
right.
right. Your impression since 1976, and we're going to get to the police report here in a moment, but what would you say generally until you came along in 2021? What was the general Vargo family attitude toward Brian's disappearance? And I'm not, you don't want to say I'm not looking to create inner family turmoil or anything, but what would you say the attitude toward Brian's disappearance has been?
Just don't talk about it because we don't want to upset grandma.
Okay. Now, it should be known, though, a lot earlier in this conversation, maybe an hour ago, you had talked about how she said that she actually called it in. But when you started looking into this, you could not find a missing persons report ever filed for his disappearance, correct?
Correct.
And so, when was the official missing persons report filed for the disappearance of Brian Vargo in March of 1976? When was it filed?
It was filed in February of 2021.
Um, your impression of that. Do you think this really is? Once again, I realize she's 100 years old. I realize she's your grandmother. Do you think that she just really, or the rest of your family just thought, you know what, we did that back in 1976 officially, and it just, or that's not really what happened? Or do you think that the police dropped the ball? How do you look at it? You're the one that's been looking at this. What do you think?
I believe that my grandmother really thought that she made a missing persons report. Back at that time, parents were very different than they are now. The father did all the things, and the mom took care of the kids at home. And my grandmother was made to feel like I'll take care of everything. And then when it came to Brian's disappearance, it was, I'm taking care of everything. This is what my grandfather said to even my father. I'm taking care of it.
Okay.
And my grandmother wasn't and didn't really know what to do.
Right. Most people don't. Even in 20, hardly anybody does. And nobody ever thinks it's going to happen to them.
Right.
And,
And then
I could please, I'm
when
sorry,
it does,
please.
when someone goes missing, you think that you'll be prepared after listening to podcasts and podcasts of true crime.
Yeah.
You're going to be like, I know exactly what I'm going to do. But when
Yep.
it happens, it's a flood of emotion
It
in
is.
yourself, and what you could have done differently, and where you may have failed, or I should have called them the day before, or things like that. And that's more of what it is than, okay, what do we do now?
Right. Okay. So called it in, told the police. Maybe they thought that was enough. Maybe not. And then, but officially on the record, and I have to ask, when the report was filed in 2021, how did the Houston police or sheriff's officer, whoever it is, how did they react having to fill out paperwork for a disappearance from 1976?
They did not want to take it. In
I'm sure
fact,
they
I
didn't.
called to find a missing persons report because I wanted to make sure that there wasn't one already out there, from when my grandmother said that she had filed one. The first question I asked, of course, I'm going to go back a little bit.
Go ahead.
Uh, and when I said, okay, did you file a missing persons report? Who did you file it with? You know, she gives me all the information that she can remember. Being in Houston, she called the HPD. So who's the first place I call? I called HPD. HPD said they didn't have one. So the next place I called was, okay, I go bigger, Harris County. Okay, Harris County doesn't have anything. Then I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe she did it in Austin because he lived in Austin.
Yeah.
Austin didn't have anything. Well, he was a student at UT. Maybe the UT police have something on this. They did not. And then maybe I went even bigger, Travis County. Travis County did not have anything on it. And then the Texas Department of Public Safety has things like that. They did not have anything on it. So after going through all of those calls, it was like, okay, how do I now, how do I get somebody looking for him?
Right.
Because all of these years, nobody's known if they had found a body. If there was an unidentified person out there, they have no way to match it to Brian because they don't even know Brian's missing.
Yep.
So I have to have Brian declared a missing person. Well, nobody wants to take the missing persons report from 1976.
No, they do not.
They're just basically adding another case onto their stack. Instead of solving one, they're
You're right.
disappearing.
You're absolutely right.
Um,
But they did. I mean, obviously, it's on the record now. But that must have. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for that one, Amanda. I guess is what I'm saying.
I'll tell you, I climbed the ladder is what what I did. I just started calling people above the next person, or until somebody said, okay, we'll take it. And even at that point, I finally talked to somebody, and they told somebody way down in the ladder, hey, you need to call this lady back and take her report. So that's how that went. I also have to mention that in order to have somebody registered on NAMUS, you have to have a police entity have a missing persons report. And that's where I was in a catch-22. And so when people or the police entities were telling me they didn't want to take it, it was like, well, what am I supposed to do? How do I get my uncle into the NAMUS database as a missing person nationwide if nobody will take him as a missing person?
Right. And you can't get any DNA taken or anything either.
That's right.
Yeah. But I should have to ask, has DNA been done? And who were the contributors?
I first want to say that I get this question a lot. So let me hit it on both places. Even before this, I had my DNA in your genealogical 23andMe,
Ancestry.com.
Heritage, and GEDmatch open to police. And obviously nothing prior to that, but they couldn't take my DNA. I suppose I'm too far removed for them to triangulate quickly. So they Austin PD cold case department was the one who finally took the missing persons report, and they had a detective go, or an investigator go, and get to another city, actually, my grandmother and my aunt's DNA.
Back then, at the time, did anybody in your family suspect, you know what, maybe Brian just ended up just staying around the Houston or Austin area? That he went missing. Of course, all roads lead to Colorado, but is there a chance that if he went missing, he actually went missing right there in Texas, like close to where his apartment was, close to where his parents live? And, what do you think?
Yes, of course. We've thought it was pretty easy to even keep your name back in the 70s and disappear.
Good point. Yep. You didn't have to change names to disappear. You just go an hour away or for coast to coast or something, and nobody would know.
There are even recent missing persons cases where somebody's, a couple hours away with their same name.
Yeah.
They're just not using their social security number.
That's right.
And I believe that case was in New York or something.
Robert Hoagland.
Yeah. And the only reason they caught or ended up finding this person is because he had a heart attack.
That's Robert Hoagland. That's Robert Hoagland. Hoagland, if anybody wants to look it up. Absolutely true. You know your disappearances, Amanda.
Yes, I do.
Certainly true. Yes, certainly true. Yeah.
So, yes, absolutely. We have thought about that. And when the internet first came around to a point where it was readily available, it was in libraries, things like that. My father, when he was told what the internet was, he was like, I'm going to go look for my brother.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
He told me that was one of the first things he ever looked up. Was Brian Vargo, Thomas Vargo, and any combination of those things, to obviously no avail. But it is not like no one has looked for him. Right. And I'll even say that even today, maybe a little creepy, but if I find somebody named Brian Vargo, I send them a postcard of Brian's picture.
Yeah.
QR code so they can scan it and go directly to my Facebook page and find out who this other Brian Vargo is.
Yeah, that's not creepy at all, Amanda. So let's talk about you again. We'll bring this back to you. how has this affected you since you got involved in 2021? Of course, you knew about the disappearance for a long time. You're in the family, but in 2021, maybe with the help of COVID coming on, you having time, time on your hands and everything else. This last 2 years, how has this search and putting all this information together and everything? How has this affected you as a person?
Um, as a person, I think I'm just more aware of, it makes me more empathetic towards other people, and that you don't really know what's happening in someone else's life, um, to either affect the way that they treat you, or even what their past experience is.
I'm guessing that you never thought you'd be in this situation. Let me always ask you this. You've known about Brian's disappearance for a long time. Could you ever foreseen in 2021 that you would get this involved?
I yes and no. I say yes because I love a puzzle. I love
Me too, yeah.
research, and um the fact that nobody was doing it made it even more of like a, okay, well, maybe I can figure this out.
Hmm.
Um a big reason to try to figure it out is for my grandmother
Yeah.
to have peace in knowing anything about
Yeah.
him.
Right. Right. In starting this, could you fall back on anything, any other experiences you have in your life, your work, your education, or anything else to fall back on to help you kind of weave, through all of this the last couple of years? Or was this really just like, you know what, I'm using things in my brain that I've never done before. I have no experience in any of these areas. What about that?
All of the above.
Okay. All right.
um I have ADHD, so I when I dive into something, I dive into it real hard. So
Mhm.
I'm versed in a lot of things that just random things.
Yeah.
But I do have to say some of it touches on child development and psychology, and those are have heavy interests of mine generally, but also the law side of it. I never thought that I had any interest in law, politics, for missing people, or um, the Freedom of Information Act,
Yeah. FOIAs. Yeah.
um, FERPA, which
Mm.
is for, it's basically the Privacy Act for your student records.
Okay.
Um,
Mhm.
I mean, those retention rates of driver's license records or
Yeah.
license plates.
Yeah.
If license plates numbers are reused, those are all things. How about the bus routes that were available in 1976, or um, businesses that were
Yeah.
around 1976? Like, what kind of gas station was he dropped off at? What bus bus line did he take? Did he always take the same type of bus? Like the same bus company? Was it Greyhound? Well, the tickets that I have are for a different um a company.
Mm.
And so then it's the laws in Colorado versus the laws in Texas, or the
Yeah.
laws in New Mexico. They're not all the same.
They're not.
Or the NAMUS thing. Do are uh, all law enforcement entities required to enter someone into NAMUS, the NAMUS database? when they have a missing person
Nope.
or when they have an unidentified person? No. What
Nope.
about blood type? Do they take every missing or unidentified person's blood type or DNA? What did they do with the bodies back in 1976?
Yeah.
Since they didn't know what DNA was back then. I mean, those are all the things. There's just so
There's
much.
so much. All right, I agree. I want to move on to this now. You should know, and we don't talk about this really publicly too much on ever on because it can be a little divisive. But sometimes many family members who appear on Found, they are the only person in an entire family working on this. And in fact, a lot of them, although it's again, we don't talk about it publicly, actually get pushback. They're actually people in a family kind of not working against, but saying, why are you dredging this all up? Can't you just let it go? How has that been for you, Amanda?
At first, I would say in the first month when I really started calling around and getting into this, it was more of a warning. Are you sure that you want to do this? Uh, what if you find out this? What if you find out that? How are you going to take it? Are you going to be able to tell your grandmother? How is the family going to take it? Things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But to be honest, no, from the family, there's been no, don't do this
Okay,
from them.
excellent, excellent. Do you have a website or Facebook page, anything like that, set up for Brian's disappearance? If so, or other, Instagram or TikTok or anything else, please tell the listeners and viewers about those sites right now.
Sure. I do have an Instagram. I believe I have a TikTok and a Twitter account for Brian. They're not really active so much. They're more of just there's a profile and there's a video of me reading reading the posted story.
Okay.
And that's really it. It's just
Okay.
different platforms for people to use just to find out the story, but each of those also direct you to the Facebook page that I keep updated. I can't maintain all these different platforms and still have my own life that's going on.
I know the
so
feeling.
so I choose, because this is not my full-time job.
Yes, of
um,
course.
although it would be cool, it's not. So I just keep up to date the Facebook page, and
And what is the
even
Facebook page? What is the name of it?
so it's searching with the number 4. So searching for Brian Vargo.
Okay. And you manage it, you start it. If there's any messages sent there, you are the one that's getting them.
Yes,
Okay. And how long did you set that up back in 2021 when you got this all started?
I did. Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay.
It was a way for me to keep um his friends and roommates or anybody that I made contact with. uh, they would all say, well, keep me posted on what happens or what you find out. So that's how it started. And then again, because I would run into roadblocks, walls, whatever you want to call them, it's become more of a, I need people knowing that we care that Brian's missing, and then just been we haven't just forgot about him. We want to know that he's out there. And if you know he's out there or you know what happened to him, we want to know.
All right. Amanda, any final words before we complete this interview?
I'm sure that I'll think of something when I complete this interview or wake up in the middle of the night and say, oh, I should have said that. Or somebody will call me and say, you didn't mention this.
No, I know the feeling on that too. Doing 300 some interviews, I know that feeling too. Yes.
So no, I can't really think of anything at the moment, but to be honest, if there's anything that I think of, it'll be on my Facebook page.
Okay, and that's searching for with a numerical 4 Brian Vargo is the Facebook page, just to remind everybody once again. And I, of course, link to it coming up to when this episode comes out. Amanda, thank you for joining all of us on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And that was my June 23rd, 2023 interview with Amanda Wattkamps, niece of Brian Vargo. To remind everyone, her father and Brian were brothers. I thank Amanda for appearing on both audio and video for this episode. Before I get into my summation, I want to urge everyone to go to Unfound's website, theunfoundpodcast.com, to take a look at the letters discussed during the interview. They are there in pretty much their entirety. There is also a lot of other media, pictures, reports, etc. concerning Brian and his disappearance on the Brian Vargo page. Once again, at theunfoundpodcast.com. For Brian's disappearance, we can all certainly agree that a police report not being filed until 2021 is shocking, especially given that Brian did not have some kind of transient lifestyle, which is usually associated with reports not being filed in a timely manner. Yet, I believe Amanda has it right when she says that her grandmother thought it was enough to just tell the police about Brian, that Brian's mother thought that would be enough for the paperwork to get started. Then she took for granted that the wheels were in motion. This makes all the sense in the world to me, especially given the era we're talking about, the 1970s. In 2023, this kind of thing would give me a lot more pause. But back then, I'm not surprised. Also, surely everybody not finding out until 2021 that Brian had dropped out of college in March 1976, right before he disappeared, is also shocking, especially considering that Brian's father was paying for it. And seriously, this is spectacular work on Amanda's part. I'm just so impressed by the work she's done as an amateur on a case that is almost 50 years old. It's crazy good. Still, despite those recent unusual revelations, my mind continues to be focused on that car title. You know I never try to get any of you to think about a particular fact or whatever in a particular way. The guests answer the questions I ask, and it's up to you to decide if everything sounds kosher or not. But dare I say it, there's no way Brian traveled the whole way back from Colorado to Southeast Texas to get his car title when he could have had it mailed. Am I crazy in thinking that way? I don't think I am. I don't know what it means. I don't exactly know how it's connected to his disappearance, if at all. I don't know what happened to the title. I don't know what happened to the car itself, although I bet Amanda will eventually find the answer to that. But the car title story Brian told his mother is something that should be doubted. Not to mention, why would he need the title anyway? If you want to spring out and break away from my own thinking after this point, totally fine. But you should view the title story with skepticism. If you'd like to hear and read my deeper analysis of the disappearance of Brian Vargo, please go to patreon.com/Unfound Podcast and read and listen to the Unfound blog. And that's the program. Right now, while you are in your podcast platform, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, wherever, give Unfound a 5-star review, a thumbs up, whatever that platform allows. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've just finished this episode of Unfound.